That's the thing most people get wrong about medieval guilds. They think it was all about skilled craftsmen taking pride in their work, protecting quality in a harsh world before factories existed. We've been sold this cozy, almost romantic picture of dedicated artisans, but that's only half the story. Here's what really happened. Guilds weren't just about protecting craftsmanship. They controlled entire economies. They determined your prices, your income, who got to work, and who would be shut out forever. They set fixed prices, limited wages, blocked newcomers, and quietly managed the money flow across whole cities, often with more control than the kings themselves had. This wasn't just a small part of medieval society. This was the entire game. Welcome to a place where wealth, control, and the past intersect. And trust me, things are never as straightforward as they appear. If you really want to grasp what guilds were about, picture yourself in medieval Europe. We're talking roughly 1000 to 1500 AD. Cities were coming back to life after hundreds of years of breakdown. Commerce was picking up again. Money was flowing back into daily transactions. But here's the catch: central power was basically non-existent. Kings had titles, sure, but actual control, not so much. There was barely any law enforcement. Markets were all over the place, unpredictable, and nobody trusted anyone. Against this messy backdrop, someone had to bring order to the chaos. That's where guilds stepped in, officially recognized groups of people doing the same type of work. Bakers, weavers, stonemasons, jewelry makers, builders. City governments or royals gave them charters, which basically meant they owned exclusive rights to make and sell things inside the city, their side of the deal. They promised consistency, quality standards, stable pricing, properly trained workers, and help for members who needed it. And honestly, at the beginning, this system actually worked. Guilds tackled genuine issues. They made sure your bread wasn't filled with sawdust. They kept weights and measures honest. They trained young people in skills that took years, sometimes decades, to learn properly. They looked after widows, covered burial expenses, and supported sick members. In a time before health insurance or government oversight, guilds built a foundation of trust. That's the story everyone remembers. What gets swept under the rug is what happened after trust transformed into power. Because here's what guilds really were: they weren't labor unions like we understand them today. They didn't exist to protect workers from wealthy bosses. Actually, they did exactly the opposite. The masters controlled guilds, the shop owners, not the trainees or junior workers. The rule makers were already the ones holding the tools, the workshops, and political connections. Workers didn't bargain with guilds, they obeyed them. Once a guild locked down a profession, they locked down the prices too openly and without apology. Price charts were displayed publicly. Charging less than the set price? Illegal. Selling through unauthorized dealers meant fines, having your goods taken, or getting kicked out entirely. They called it maintaining stability. What it really was: running a cartel. Look at Florence, one of medieval Europe's wealthiest cities. The wool business there was run by the Arte della Lana, one of the city's most powerful guilds. They decided who could make fabric, what quality levels were acceptable, how much raw wool could be worked with, and what prices the finished products would sell for. Florence's fortune didn't come from open market competition. It came from tightly managed production on a massive scale. London's Worshipful Company of Goldsmiths operated the same way. They controlled purity standards, pricing, and who could even touch precious metals. Sure, quality mattered, but so did keeping competitors out of the game. Monopoly and respectability went hand in hand. Bread guilds all across Europe fixed prices on basic food, the official reason. Protecting people from price gouging, the real effect. Guaranteed profits for bakers while pushing risk onto everyone else, grain suppliers, workers, anyone not protected by the guild. Then we get to wages. Guilds didn't fight to increase worker pay. They locked it in place. Apprentices were tied down for years, sometimes 10 years or more, working endless hours for barely any money, all for training and maybe a shot at moving up someday. Journeymen earned set wages with almost zero room to negotiate. Want to open your own shop? You needed approval, fees, citizenship status, and usually family ties. Being talented wasn't enough. You could be a master at your trade and still be blocked from ownership your entire life. Because getting permission mattered more than being good at what you do, these barriers to entry were completely intentional. Apprenticeship costs climbed over time. Training got longer and longer. Requirements for membership got tougher and tougher. Many guilds completely excluded women, outsiders, religious minorities, and anyone from the countryside. Not necessarily out of pure hatred, but because limiting who gets in protects the income of those already inside. This is the crucial part to understand. Guilds didn't become restrictive because they were morally corrupt. They became restrictive because monopoly power rewards keeping people out. Once you control who gets in, competition becomes your enemy, not unfair treatment. Guilds didn't stop at controlling markets. They shaped governments too. Guild leaders held seats on city councils. They funded public projects. They lent money to rulers. In cities like Florence, holding political office was often directly connected to being in a guild. Economic muscle and governmental power merged quietly under official procedures and legal documents. Before modern banking systems existed, guilds were part of how money worked. This created an odd kind of stability. Prices didn't jump around wildly. Production followed regular, predictable patterns. Social tension was managed through inclusion if you were inside the guild and exclusion if you weren't. Everything stayed orderly, but social mobility, that got sacrificed. And this trade-off lasted for hundreds of years. This is where the story gets uncomfortable, because none of this is unique to medieval times. What guilds show us is a pattern that keeps repeating throughout economic history. Organizations created to prevent chaos eventually become systems that protect the people already at the top from any change. Rules start as ways to coordinate. Coordination becomes rigid control. Control eventually becomes invisible because it's lawful, procedural, and just how things are done. You don't need armies to enforce it. Medieval craftsmen needed permission to do their jobs. Modern workers need degrees, licenses, compliance paperwork, and startup money. The words changed. The underlying logic stayed the same. Guilds didn't collapse because they were evil. They thrived because they fixed real problems and then refused to give up the power that came from fixing those problems. They didn't create inequality from scratch. They made it official policy. Once you understand this, it changes how you view prices, wages, and money itself. Not as natural results of talent or hard work, but as negotiated outcomes within systems that pick who gets access and who gets shut out. Guilds didn't vanish. They transformed. When medieval Europe started breaking apart under pressure from new ideas, new trade paths, and new technology, guilds didn't just die out. They fought back, they adjusted. And when they finally lost their official monopolies, their core principles survived, quietly woven into modern economic structures, because what guilds truly mastered wasn't medieval craftsmanship, it was controlling who gets to participate. As powerful nation-states emerged in the early modern era, kings and parliaments started stripping away guild privileges. At least officially, free trade became the rallying cry. Competition was celebrated. Markets were supposedly opening up for everyone, but reality told a different story. Guilds lost their official charters, yet what they did just moved elsewhere. Professional licensing took over from guild membership. Certifications replaced apprenticeships. Regulatory agencies replaced guild councils. The gatekeepers changed their clothes, not their motives. And once again, the reasoning sounded perfectly logical. Standards protect buyers. Licensing guarantees quality. Regulations prevent disorder. All of that can be accurate, but still not the complete truth. Because just like medieval guilds, today's gatekeeping structures don't just ensure quality, they control who's allowed to compete. The medieval stonemason needed authorization to build within city limits. Today's professional needs certification, official approval, regulatory compliance, capital and time, often many years before earning permission to even start. None of this appears to be exclusion. It appears to be proper procedure. And that's exactly what makes it so powerful. Wages followed this same path too. In medieval cities, wages weren't negotiated in free markets. They were standardized, stabilized, and capped. Not to empower the workers, but to maintain order and predictability for those running things. Today, keeping wages down rarely involves obvious price-fixing schemes. It happens through degree requirements inflating constantly, outsourcing, non-compete agreements, platform economies, and dividing workers into tiers. The tools are different. The result is remarkably similar. Stability for insiders, obstacles for everyone else. This explains why guild-style thinking keeps coming back whenever markets mature. New, chaotic markets reward creative innovation. Established markets reward staying protected. Eventually, the winners aren't necessarily the most talented. They're the ones closest to writing the rules. And when those rules get complicated enough, they stop looking like power structures. They start looking like just common sense. This is also why rising prices and growing inequality often happen together. When access is restricted, competition weakens. When competition weakens, prices easily go up but rarely come down. Costs get pushed to those lower down the chain. Wages don't keep up, profits pile up at the top, and the system claims it's working exactly as intended because in a twisted way it is. Guilds figured this out centuries ago. They didn't need obvious exploitation, they didn't need force or violence. They needed official recognition. Once the government acknowledged their rules as legitimate, their control became practically invisible. Market results appeared natural, failure seemed personal. If you couldn't earn more, it wasn't blamed on the system, it was blamed on you. That psychological trick might be the guild's longest-lasting impact. Because once people start believing barriers are their own personal failings, power structures don't need to defend themselves anymore. This is where learning about money gets uncomfortable but absolutely essential. Most people are taught to think about wealth in terms of effort, work harder, get more skills, be more productive. Those things definitely matter, but they're not the complete picture. They never have been. Building real wealth has always depended on access. Access to markets, to money, to connections, to permission. Guilds made this obvious. Modern systems hide it. And here's the final truth you need to take away from this story. Guilds weren't evil villains. They weren't noble heroes either. They were organizations responding logically to their incentives. They solved real problems. Then they defended their solutions. Then they defended their own positions. That's not medieval thinking. That's human nature. History doesn't repeat exactly, but patterns do emerge. And the pattern guilds reveal is this. When economic structures become too rigid, opportunity for movement dies quietly. Not through dramatic uprisings, but through forms and procedures. Understanding this doesn't mean rejecting all rules or standards. It means recognizing where real power exists, and where it silently determines who gets to build genuine wealth and who will always be locked out. Because once you see the system for what it is, you stop blaming yourself for outcomes it was never designed to let you achieve. And that's where genuine financial freedom actually starts. If this shifted how you see things, hit that subscribe button. History holds the answers, and I'll keep showing you exactly where to find them.